I'm so blessed. What a life. What an incredible life. That whole era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll connotes, well, it just connotes exactly what it sounds like. Like everybody's doing drugs and everybody's having sex with each other. And that's not how it was for us. David had already done all his drugs with Deep Purple and stopped. And I never did drugs and I never drank. So we were very professional, and we wanted to present ourselves as such. And then we wanted to get to sleep early.
David was hysterical. I mean, I interviewed him once, I think around that album, John, and he loves to turn on the British. And I'm interested.
Yes, he does.
We're used to seeing you on stage doing these shows, but when you're at home, what sort of music do you listen to? And he said, Nick, when I'm at home, I'm a fool for the Baroque. I love to put on the classical music, but of course, when I'm with the boys down at the Snake Pit, we like to rock out. And,
Nick, that's exactly right. We used to listen. That's all we used to listen to was classical music. And him knowing a lot more about the history of it was just fascinating to me. And it just fed my soul. So that's really all we listened to. But John, David actually told me, he said that he did, he wasn't a drug addict. He didn't have that that constitution that wasn't him, but he did do what he did. The little that he did do, he did it with Deep Purple, and then that was it, and it was over. And none of the guys in Whitesnake, nobody did drugs, nobody drank. I mean, David would have a little bit of cognac at the end of the evening, to slow down. And that was about it. But it was a different story when we first started and we had to open for Motley Crue. Then the drugs and the alcohol and the girls came out. That was wild. Oh my goodness. They were crazy. I mean, they made it so that I knew that when I had control of what was going on with Whitesnake, that there were I never let any passes go out to girls. There were no backstage passes allowed to the girls. I put that rule in place. And the wives that were, they didn't not like me, but I was in all the videos and they were like, well, what are we, And so when I put that rule in place that there will be no groupies and there will never be any passes handed out to any girls, the wives in the band all of a sudden really, really loved me.
Wow. How did you meet?
Can you imagine a rock band that absolutely no backstage passes? And then the bands that opened up for us too. I wouldn't give them passes for girls to come backstage. I lived it. I saw what those girls were doing. I was like, not with my guy. This is not happening.
So how did you meet David?
No. I met him at a fantastic, have any of you been to the restaurant, the Le Dome on Sunset in LA?
Yes,
a phenomenal, just a classic, just 5-star, incredible restaurant. And I was getting up to go to the restaurant and John Sykes was having dinner with David. And John came up to me and he said, would you care to have a drink with me and my friend? And I said, no, sorry. No, I don't drink. So no, thank you. So I walked off to the ladies' room. I came back. And David, being as smooth as he is, as any of you know, he said to me, would you care to have a cup of tea? with me and my friend. And I said, a cup of tea I can have. Yes. So that's how we met. So very smart thinking, very smart.
Wow. So you were wooed by the British accent.
I was worried about, the alcohol. I didn't want to sit around with a bunch of guys, with long hair thinking, I mean, at this point, David was in debt to Geffen to the tune of $2 million, and didn't know how he was eventually, how he was going to pay that off. So I was sitting there with two wannabe rock stars, and the last thing I wanted them to be with two wannabe drunk rock stars.
I wonder, Tawny, have you met any of your heroes? And if so, did they live up to your expectations?
I didn't get to meet my hero. My hero was Freddie Mercury. And I remember being 12, 13 years old and locking myself in my room and just listening to Bohemian Rhapsody, that album, over and over and over again. So I really, really wish I would have met him. But I loved Joe Elliott. I loved Def Leppard, and I got to meet him, and I thought he was, of all the rockers, for some reason, there's just something about Joe Elliott that I just think is so sexy, and he's so incredible that I just find him absolutely adorable.
You've got a thing about the Brits, haven't you?
I do have a thing about the Brits. It's funny, I've met just by the bands that opened up for us, the bands that we had to open up for when we first started. And, you meet all these rock stars and in my business, because I've been acting for so long, so many actors, but there really, really was something, John, about Joe that he had this charisma, or should I say has this charisma that is just, you're either born with it or you're not. And years ago, I was at a screening for a movie at Grauman's Chinese Theater, and the after party was going to be at the Roosevelt Hotel across the street. I left the movie a little early, walked into the ballroom. There was nobody in there except for this guy. And this guy was about 20 feet from me. And that was it. It was just him in this room. And you could feel this electricity. And I was like, is there a light bulb out? Is there, is something wrong with one of the outlets? Something's going on. And this guy turns around and he looks at me, and I'm like, I don't recognize him. But he just exuded this type of charisma. Well, about 6 months later, Thelma and Louise comes out, and I recognize the face, and it's Brad Pitt. Oh. And I'm telling you, he's the only actor that I have met, and I've met tons like you guys and all our rock stars that had this incredible charisma that there was just absolutely no denying it. And like I said, at that point, he wasn't even anybody. So he wasn't putting on airs. He just, and I think still to this day, from what I hear, like what John was saying about Joe, is what you see is what you get with him. And it's so wonderful to hear. And it's great to hear that about Joe. It really is. I mean, I like I said, I met him backstage with David, and, meeting everybody and not getting any like, oh my goodness feelings. I was with my husband, and Joe Elliott was making me go, oh my gosh, like, oh, David, go to the restroom. David, leave for a second. So nice, so nice. And ironically, he is another one of my heroes. Just, I mean, come on, you guys, like the songs, every song, every single song that the man has written is just, if you heard the song, it's one of those, his music is the type that if you hear the song, you can remember where you were the very first time you heard it. Yeah. Just incredible musician.
And that must happen to you a lot in Los Angeles, Tawny, because you must be always bumping into people, because it's that kind of place, isn't it?
It is. But during the pandemic, I moved down to Newport Beach, which is a beautiful place. And Kobe Bryant lived just down the street from us. And that was, as you guys know, just absolutely horrifying. So sad. And he was another guy who was, what you saw is what you got. Just a wonderful human being. My second ex-husband, who was a baseball player, 6'7", and they when Kobe would have birthday parties for his kids, the Shaq and all the guys would come down. And I felt so sorry for the other husbands because they were left over on that side, and only you had to be 6'7" and taller to hang with this crew over there. So, and plus Chuck was a famous baseball player as well. But yeah, it really tore up our city horribly. I mean, we moved down here, and I can kind of speak for Kobe as well on this, because we don't have paparazzi, and we can live our lives and not, it's not fun leaving your house, and every time you leave, there's a camera following you. So living in Newport Beach is probably one of the top 5, if not the top 3 nicest places to live in America. And and to have Kobe, and every day you would see him, and he was just such a great guy, and it tore our city apart. Absolutely tore us apart.
And it makes it even worse to find out that it was actually pilot error.
It was avoidable. It was absolutely avoidable. And I'm kitty corner to his church, which was called the Queen of Angels. And he went there that morning, which was a Sunday morning, at 7:00, and the bells toll every morning at 7 and at 9. And I'll wake up, and every single Sunday morning, the bells toll. And I hate to bring this down. I don't mean to be such a downer, but in a way, it made me sad for the longest time. But now when I hear the bells, all I can think about is what a wonderful life, what a beautiful family, and what a great soul he was.
So, you were talking about sportsmen and charismatic people that transcended. You knew O.J. Simpson, didn't you, Tawny?
Yes, I did. We were quite good friends. I went out on a couple. I was young. I was 20. I feel like that whole, even though I don't count myself in, but it was like the Me Too, where the guy was older and you were younger, and they were kind of like the Svengali, and so he was very, very well educated, very smart, and just quite a interesting man. So I went out with him a couple of times for dinner, and I remember one time I was in New York, and he met me for dinner. He happened to be there as well, and we would always get into this. I would always say to him, "You think everybody in the world knows who you are? Like, you just think that, like, wherever you go, you just think everybody knows who you are. So we walked into this hotel on 6th Avenue that was owned by a friend of ours that owns the New York Jets. And there were 6 diplomats from China who didn't speak a word of English. They had their sashes on, they had their medals on, the whole thing. And they took one look at him and they went, "Oh, O.J. Simpson." And I went, "Oh my God. Oh my, of course. Not a word of English, but knew, O.J. Simpson." And it was like, he just looked at me like, "My point?" Like, "Yeah, okay, I get your point." But I had charisma and really kind of taught me to how to deal with fans when they come up and want to ask for your autograph while you're eating dinner, and I've always been like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And he taught me, there's a nice way of saying, "Can we wait until after I'm done? I'm having dinner with my family." So there were some good lessons I learned. And then also some bad lessons that all of us learned. And that was just tragic, but talk about charisma. Honestly, I remember walking down by one of the 59th Street, and they were doing construction, and the guys up on the 25th floor were yelling down, "Hey, OJ!" I'm like, how do you recognize OJ from 25 stories up? But the world I don't know if I can say the world, but America was just absolutely enthralled with him. And which made it very difficult for me to think, why would somebody who has everything throw it all away to do nothing but sit in a cell for the rest of his life? I have a thing for tall guys. Yeah. So, my ex-husband Chuck was 6'7", David 6'3", Rob Crosby 6'4". Yeah, there's a theme here. So I left Rob for a guy by the name of Pete Angelus. Do any of you know who Pete Angelus is? He eventually, so he was the lighting director for Van Halen at the time. And as you, I'm sure all know, the crew does not tour on the bus. They do not live on the bus with the band. Like the crew, they have their own buses. They eat McDonald's, their favorite food on the planet, and that's it. And so I got to spend 3.5 years of my life touring the world with Van Halen. So I obviously got to know Eddie and Michael and Alex and David extremely well. And Eddie was one of those guys, if any of you had ever met Eddie, he was just what you see is what you get. And he never changed with the amount of godness that he had, that he projected, that he had. He was obviously incredible. Absolutely. I just finished shooting the documentary about 3 weeks ago. We just wrapped up the documentary. And, Eddie was the kind of guy that he sat on the bus, and as long as he had a pick in his mouth and he was playing, he could have been hooked up to, 20, Marshall stacks or none. And he was the exact same person. It got to the point with me that I was touring with this rock god, and all I could think was, oh my God, please not another guitar solo. Like I couldn't handle another guitar solo. It was just too much for me. But David lived with Pete and I, and Pete, my boyfriend, eventually became the manager of Van Halen. And he also managed the Black Crowes and a few other bands. But David, we were the three amigos, and we would vacation together. I mean, why he had all this money. They, the catalogs were split 4 ways, and he slept on our couch for 6 months. So one time we're in St. Lucia in the Bahamas, and David goes, "Give me your purse," as we're, going through customs. And I'm like, "Why?" He's just, "Give me your purse, give me your purse." So I gave him my purse. And on the other side of customs, I get my purse. He goes, "Give me back your purse, give me back your purse." And he pulled out an ounce of cocaine. And I was I was young, but I knew what an ounce of cocaine was going to get me. I mean, the guy put me in such jeopardy. I could have done 10 years in jail. And I said, "David, why did you do that to me?" He goes, "Because look at me and look at you. They were going to ravish my stuff, and they weren't going to go through any of yours. So I knew you'd be fine." Well, thanks, David. Thanks, David. So yeah, he was a wild man, David Lee Roth, a wild man. Can you imagine one of your best friends putting an ounce of cocaine in your, possession as you're going through customs?
No, I can't.
It was insanity. It was insanity. But yeah, I mean, I was 19, 20 years old at the time. So I later realized in a deeper way what that meant. And then every night he would sleep. He slept on our couch in the living room. And this was when sunset. And I'm sure you guys, any of you back in the 80s, if you went to LA, Sunset was full of hookers. Now they've cleaned it up. It's a lot nicer up there. And every single night, David woke me and Pete up, and he was like, "Okay, let's go." So the 3 of us would drive to Sunset. And then I was the one who had to negotiate with the girl. Well, David Lee Roth's in the back, and I'd be like, "Excuse me, ma'am. Would you mind coming back to our hotel, our apartment?" And then after about 4 or 5 months of that, I was like, "Pete, I can't put up with this anymore. There's hookers sleeping in my living room. David, please get out." All he did was move. We lived right across the street from the Sunset Marquee. There was another building right next to the Sunset Marquee that was a bit of a tower. He moved directly across the street from us and continued to try to get us to go pick up hookers for him every single night. And I was like, "This is rock and roll. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with it," but he was the exception. David was a wild man. I mean, and also had an incredible amount of charisma. And I'll never forget the first thing he ever said to me. I flew into Philadelphia to see them on tour. Pete had flown me out, and there was a bar on top of the hotel. And I said, "Oh my God." And he said, "Honey." Yeah, he said, "Honey," he goes, "God ain't going to help you in a place like this." And exactly. If there were 3 things I could count on every single night, was David in his striped pants, jumping off the riser, and like Nadia Comaneci. I mean, he had his legs out. He could touch his toes. He was just all over the place. And then Eddie and these incredible guitar solos that I got so sick of listening to. And then Alex Van Halen, who I think is one of the greatest drummers that you rarely hear about. When people are talking about your top 5 drummers, Alex is absolutely, without a doubt, up there. Incredible. I mean, there would be no Tommy Lee without an Alex Van Halen. Just incredible. So a friend of mine just sent me a TikTok video of David walking from backstage to the stage. And I will tell you, until that, I mean, God forbid, but until that man is 6 feet under, his vibrato and what he thinks about himself, and everything is just so strong. And you know, you have to give it up to him, because he's a wild man who's like, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to portray. And damn it, you're going to love me for it. Right. Well, and also, I mean, also the egos clash between David Coverdale and Steve Vai.
Really?
Yeah, because Steve is so used to being the front man. And when you're David Coverdale, you're the front man. No one's going to take that shine away from you. And Steve would just, you know, just one guitar string could, you know, get a crowd moving like nobody's business. And it really started to wear David down. And, you know, eventually he fired him. He fired him. So, and then the little story about, when we first started, and we didn't have a manager at the time, and there were two managers up for consideration. One of them was Doc McGee, the infamous Love Doc McGee, and Howard Kaufman. And David Geffen wanted Whitesnake to go with Doc McGee. And I was like, but Doc has Motley, Doc has John Bon Jovi. We're never going to see the light of day. This is ridiculous. So I took a meeting with David Geffen, and the two of us, by the end of the meeting, had gotten up and had our hands on the desk, leaning into each other like two lions going for it. And David's like, they're going with Doc McGee. And I'm leaning in going, no, they are going with Howard Kaufman. And I'm happy to say I won that fight. You know, I think I was mentioning earlier that there was that he does a true Hollywood story, and they did one on me, and John Kolodner was interviewed, and John Kolodner called me Yoko Ono. And at the time, I was really hurt. My feelings got really hurt that I was called Yoko Ono. And it wasn't that I split the band up. It was just that I was picking the singles. I was picking the A and B side. I was producing. I was picking Slows, Neil Slow's Hour to do all the photo shoots. I was doing this. I was doing that. And I was getting in everybody's way. And so John called me Yoko Ono. And now that I'm writing my book, I'm like, I am so grateful, because he solidified my, you know, all my stories that I have to tell. You're right. I was Yoko Ono. Yeah, I had some, I mean, I literally would have to get into an argument with Kolodner, who's a character in himself, as you guys know, about what was going to be the A and B side of the album, of the singles. Yeah, it was another story that Rudy Sarzo just told me that I completely forgot was right at the height of Is This Love, David would not play it on stage. He refused to play that song to the audience. So it went through all the channels. It went through, it went through the band. We have to play it. No, it went through Jimmy Ayers. Do any of you know Jimmy Ayers? Famous road manager for for Doc and Howard and Aerosmith and everything. And he just wouldn't do it. So David Geffen called him. David wouldn't do it. Howard Kaufman called him. David wouldn't do it. So all of a sudden, one night, Rudy walks out and he sees the set list, and he sees Is This Love? And he was like, they got to Tawny. Bad Witch. Like, on one hand, I drove them crazy because I literally would go into the studio and, you know, like David would sing 16 tracks and I would pick the word from each line and help mix the album. And I was picking the singles, I was picking the, and that drove them nuts. But on the other hand, when they wanted something done, they knew who to come to. So,
didn't you do the choreography on the videos as well?
I did. I had a very, very sweet Paula Abdul was hired to come do the choreography. And she got there. The cars were all lined up. Everything was lit. We're ready to go. And she said, so do you have any dance background? And I said, I was a gymnast and a ballerina. She goes, okay, show me what you got. So I got on top of the cars and I started doing my front walkovers and back flips and everything. And she turned around to Marty Callner and she went, she doesn't need me. And she left. Wow. And Marty went, action. And that's exactly how we shot that video. They just let me go and let me do whatever I wanted to do.
Wow. I was just thinking, you know, you've done everything, you know, from appearing on the album covers to the choreography to being in the videos to, you know, sort of compositing the tracks and mixing and everything. I mean, have you ever thought of going into management? You'd be a rock and roll manager, or at least a tour manager.
Yeah, I have absolutely thought about. I would love to be the tour manager. I have also thought about management, but from an A&R position, because that's really where I feel that my talent kind of lies in, is the music aspect. You know, I was the jack of all trades. I got to do everything. And I had the most wonderful, wonderful time. The only thing that I wouldn't want to do is do the routing of like when we were going to play, at what time, what hotel we're going to stay at, line up the hotels, get the bus. I mean, all of that is
well, you have assistants for that.
Talent in itself.
The schedules.
Yeah, the scheduling. My ADD just wouldn't allow me to do that. But yeah, I had an absolute ball doing all of that.
Right. What do you think is the most rock and roll thing you've ever done, or that's ever happened to you? Okay, well, I'm going to have to call myself out on this one. My favorite thing in the world is traveling in the bus. I obviously got to decorate the bus. David and I, we got the back. I put a big queen size bed in there, a big television. And I loved keeping the windows open and driving through like Montana and seeing the lightning strike and everything. And so what they would do for me is David and I, of course, had a butler. His name was Peter. And so when we got to the hotel, if I was asleep, what Peter would do is he would get the key and go into my hotel room, and he would take duct tape and he would duct tape all the curtains shut so that no light could come in to my room. And then what they would do is they would pick me up while I was sleeping, and they would carry me from the bus to my hotel room without waking me up, and then lay me in my bed like the Princess and the Pea, and like bow down and then leave me to sleep. And so I had my own little rock and roll moment there. So they did that every night with me, which was, and then I was talking to Rudy about this the other day. He goes, I saw you in a few wheelchairs as well when they would do that. So that was pretty rock and roll to have your curtains
taped down so the princess couldn't get any sun into the room, and just being carried to her suite. Not David being carried, me being carried to her suite. And I was just like, I mean, I look back on that, I'm like, I did that. Like, I made somebody carry me to my bedroom so that I didn't have to walk. That was pretty rock and roll.
Yeah, that'll do. Tawny, can you remember? Have you thought of something? Let's end with your killer story.
There's so many, from David Lee Roth having to do a photo shoot for Circus magazine, and the girl didn't show up. So Pete, my boyfriend, put me in the G-string and everything that this nice Jewish girl wasn't supposed to be in, and put me in the pictures with David crawling all over me. I mean, from moments like that to being in Japan and having the promoter wanting to take the guys to the bathhouses with the girls. And once again, Tawny's coming in with girls, not going to happen. So the rest of the band's like, oh my God, like, get her out of here. Like she's killing all the fun here. I was like, not going to happen. Not going to happen. So the wives did love me for that. But I mean, there's so many of them. I'm so blessed. What a life. What an incredible life. I mean, who gets to tour with Eddie Van Halen for 3.5 years on a one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived, and then Ratt and Duran Duran and Motley Crue and everything else. And I also got to pick the opening acts. And so they would give me the cassette. And one of the cassettes that they gave me was this little band that no one had heard of called Guns N' Roses. And I heard their music and I went, absolutely not. They are going to blow Whitesnake off the stage. I am not letting these guys open for Whitesnake. So I turned them down. But I mean, I mean, just what I was able to do, what I got to do, I look back on that and I do not for a second take any of my stories or anything that I got to do for granted. It was just an incredible life. And whoever dropped me in the middle of that, I am so grateful for.
I've got to tell you, I've enjoyed this so much, and there's a lot more to come by the sound of it.
Saving a lot for the book, but yes.
Oh well, we'll look forward to that. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
Thank you.
And for
actually, I've been kissed by Steven Tyler. I've had those lips on my lips, so I'm grateful for that moment. So, I mean, in a very polite way.
It's really been great fun. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I really have, and you guys have stirred up memories, and you're going to help me go write a few pages for my book right now. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Did you want a little, just a quick ID from Tawny?
Do you want me to do an ID?
That'd be great.
That'd be brilliant.
Hi, this is Tawny Kitaen, and I am feeling so manic. And I've got an outlet for that, and it's called Manic TV. Welcome. One take, Tawny.
Yeah. So professional.
Guys, thank you so much. You've all been so great, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, and thank you for getting in touch with me.
Oh, come back.
Absolute pleasure. You're welcome back anytime.
I would love to. Thank you.
Next week.
All right, you guys. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, look after yourself, Tawny. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. You've got it. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.